Hey guys, today we're talking about the all-new Charlotte Tilbury Skin Foundation. I've been wearing this foundation for the last 7 days. Today is the 8th day that I have this on, and there is a lot to talk about. Now, I was really excited with this foundation. This is my first time trying a Charlotte Tilbury foundation, and the sound of it, skin foundation, it sounded really great. But really, is it that great though? That's what we'll be talking about today. Now, the shade that I'm currently wearing right now is shade 9 Neutral. This is a really good shade for me for summer, and for my winter shade around NC 3840, I found that 8 Neutral is a really good match. Let's move on to the application. Now, for application, I have really reduced down my lighting just so that you can really see the skin texture and then see how foundation will look. For skin prep, I've kept it very simple, a lightweight serum and then a very lightweight moisturizer. That's it. I didn't want anything too hydrating on my skin. I'm in summer at the moment, and with this very hydrating foundation, it would turn me into a bit of a shiny mess, so we don't want that. As for my color corrector, I've also opted for a color corrector that isn't emollient or dewy. So this is the Live Tinted in the shade Rise, so that's what I'm using. So picking up the shade 9 Neutral, I'm going to dot this all over my face. So starting with here. This is a very thick foundation. I think you can tell that just as I'm applying it, it suddenly feels quite thick and emollient. Now, this foundation doesn't dry down quickly, so I can take my time and dot it on my face and take my time and blend it. So that is not an issue. So this is how much I have on to give me medium coverage. Then I'm going to take the Spectrum Katie Hughes number 6. This is a foundation brush. So if you have any foundation brush, this is a good one to spread this foundation out. And that's because it's quite thick and emollient. And so what I want to do is just very gently smooth this out. I haven't really liked using a buffing brush, work this into the skin. The texture of this foundation is a little bit too thick. And so I found that actually if you take a foundation brush and just evenly spread it all over your face first, and then go in with a buffing brush, you get a much better finish. Or a beauty blender. So you still want to do foundation brush all over the face and then press it in with the beauty blender. So all I'm doing is kind of working this very gently and swiping it across the face. And the reason why I'm being so gentle here is because the foundation has a tendency to stick to dry patches, and I don't want to give it any ammunition to do that, which is the reason why I'm very gently swiping it so that any dry patches will just lay flat. I mean, I think you can tell that the finish of this is really beautiful. It looks super hydrated, and I really enjoy how this looks sort of in this section of my face. And I'll talk about more about my pore area in a minute. I'm also being careful on my forehead because I have dry patches right in the middle there. Right here, it is catching on my forehead. All the dry patch right here. And this is me being gentle. If I had used another brush and just whacked this foundation on, it would cling to those dry patches and it would look very obvious. I'm just going to lightly buff it into the skin. Again, I'm going to be very light because I don't want this to attach to any dry patches. And this foundation absolutely attaches itself to every little dry patch. So if you're someone who struggles with a lot of dry patches, this is probably not going to be a foundation for you, unless of course you're prepared to exfoliate pretty much every time before you wear this. Put in a little bit more pressure in areas I don't have a dry patch, like right here, and I want this to get into the pores. So I'm definitely going to be firm in this area. This also has a tendency to make my pores look big, which is the reason why I'm taking the time to really buff it into the pores. Application for this foundation, you guys, definitely takes a long time. Of course, you could just whack it on and blend, but I found with wearing it for the last 7 days, is that it really doesn't look good, and it can emphasize my patches, my pores, and so taking the time to apply it this way, I get a better finish. On my forehead, where this is already caught onto the dry patches, I'm going to very gently just spread it across my forehead. I'm not going to use swirling motions here because otherwise that's going to lift those dry patches and make them even more visible. For powder application. Course, the forehead as well. This is what the foundation looks like after powder application, and I use the Charlotte Tilbury powder in medium. I've powdered around my mouth, my cheek area right here, and then my forehead. Now let's have a chat. So as you saw, the application for this foundation is actually a little bit tricky. I tried several different ways to apply this foundation throughout this week, and really the best way that I found is that you want to be using something to glide the foundation evenly over your skin. So like a foundation brush is best. And then you need something to kind of buff it into the skin because it's quite a thick foundation. So you really needs to be worked in. But if you have dry patches, you have to be careful with that, because if you're really buffing it in, you're going to be dislodging a lot of those dry patches. They will become really visible and the foundation will look horrible. So if you are really someone who has a lot of dry patches, I don't recommend this foundation for you. I think you're going to struggle to make it work for you. This week alone, I think I've exfoliated 3 times just to make this foundation look good on my skin. Skin prep I recommend, especially for combination skin, is to really use very lightweight products, including sunscreen. If you have a very hydrating emollient sunscreen, this formula I don't think is going to play well with that, just because of how thick and emollient this foundation is. Unless you have really dry skin, minus the dry patches. If you have really dry skin, you will be okay with hydrating skincare and this foundation. If you have oily skin, you probably want to avoid this foundation. It is pretty shiny. You can of course use a mattifying primer with this, and that will help with that oil control. Now there's parts of this foundation I really love. So for example, the finish around this part of my face looks really beautiful. It looks really hydrating and soft. I kind of like the look that is giving me. It's giving me this creamy, glowy look to the skin, and I really enjoy that finish. What I don't enjoy is how it clings to my forehead. I don't enjoy how it looks on my pore area. This is really the problematic part for me. I found that this formulation sadly really enhances my pores. Like, booyah, my pores will stand out. I don't find that it smooths over my pores whatsoever. Everywhere else, it looks absolutely stunning, but in the pore area, I really don't like how it looks. Now, I can work with it by using a mattifying and a smoothing primer underneath. But again, already I feel like this foundation is rather high maintenance. I have to really make it work to make it look beautiful. So perhaps not the best foundation for people who have enlarged pores, oily skin, a lot of dry patches. You may actually want to avoid this foundation altogether. For others, I think you will probably really love it because of that beautiful hydrating creamy finish that it gives. Now, although this enhances my pores, I just want to quickly mention that I haven't found that it actually settles in my pores. So that doesn't really happen with this foundation. So for example, when I reviewed the Lisa Eldridge foundation, one of the critiques for that one was that it really settled into my pores. With this foundation, although because it's hydrating and dewy and glowy, it makes my pores stand out, it doesn't settle into them. And so As long as I keep applying powder throughout the day, keep this area nice and matte, I'll be okay with it. I find that this foundation is just too much work for me. I have to exfoliate, I have to use really lightweight skincare products. I can't be layering a lot of serums and toners and things like that. I have to keep it really minimal. So I have to be careful with application because I can't just whack this on, blend, and go out the door. I really have to be delicate with application to make sure it doesn't attach to my dry patches. And if I want it to look really good over my pore area, I have to use a pore smoothing primer underneath. And then throughout the day, I will need to blot and or add powder as well, just to keep this area looking smooth. So that is a lot of work for a foundation. I am personally very low maintenance when it comes to foundation. I want to pop it on and I want to be out the door. I don't want to fuss around with a foundation for too long. And so that's one of the major cons for me with this formula, is with my skin type and with my skin concerns, it just takes way too much work. So in terms of coverage, I would say it has definitely up to medium coverage. It's not any more than that. You're not going to get full coverage with this. Certainly light to medium is your best bet, which is great because I love medium coverage foundations. Also, another thing to note with this, the more you try to build coverage, the worse sometimes it can look. This is one of those foundations where less is really more. The amount that I've applied today is probably just enough. Any more than that and the foundation will start looking heavy on the skin. Just going back to the finish, I think the finish is really pretty on camera as well. So if you like to do some camera work, I just think the finish on camera is actually beautiful. And that's because this is a glowy foundation, so it will reflect the light. So although in real life, I look at my skin and I think, yeah, it looks nice, but not great. On camera, however, it looks better on camera than it looks in real life. I personally probably want to look better in real life than on camera perhaps, but for those of you who have your own channels or you love to film, keep that in mind. This may actually look better on camera than it does in real life. Now, in terms of settling into fine lines, already as I'm talking, it's already settling, and it hasn't been very long since I've applied this. And of course, I've set it with powder as well, and it's already moving and it's already settling into those lines. So, who do I think this foundation will look beautiful on? I'm almost inclined to say young people, but for people who don't have these fine lines, people who don't have a lot of dry patches, people who don't have enlarged pores or overly oily skin, I think if you don't have any of these, this foundation will probably look beautiful on you. It would look good on camera. It would probably wear really well for you as well. By the way, what do you think of this eye look? I absolutely adore how this look has turned out. I love this tone of green. I feel like this really flatters my olive skin. So I used the Charlotte Tilbury quad. This is in Rebel. And for my eye look today, I've actually used all 4 of these shades, and I just adore how this turned out. This palette is really beautiful, especially if you like, of course, green tones. So let's now move on to the wear test. Hey guys, so it's been just over 9 hours and I haven't blotted, I haven't added any powder, and this is what my skin looks like. As expected, I am absolutely very shiny in my cheek area and of course in my forehead. Also, the foundation has settled quite a bit around my mouth. I think you can see that. I'm going to quickly blot. So I've lowered my lighting and this is what the foundation looks like now. So after 9 hours of wear, of course, I've gotten shiny and the foundation has actually settled quite a bit around my laugh lines. It also looks a little bit cakey just around my laugh lines around here as well. Then other things that I've noticed is that The foundation seems to have broken up a little bit just around here. I'm not quite sure. So I feel like this area is looking quite uneven. In a nutshell, I do think the finish of this foundation is really beautiful, but it really just depends on what skin type you have and what skin concerns you may have. I've been using the samples for this, and am I going to buy it? No. Even though I do like the finish, that really hydrated, glowy finish that this foundation has, I have enjoyed that. It's too much work for me. I am very much a low maintenance gal when it comes to foundations. I am definitely not going to buy this foundation, but I can definitely see that there will be people who will absolutely love it, and I can see why. Let me know in the comment section below, will you be trying it? Have you tried it already, and how are you finding it? Also, if you have any other foundation requests, leave that in the comment section below as well. And I'll see you guys in my next video. See ya!